KVUE's own Tony Plohetski has been selected as one of 2 journalists to be honored with the inaugural Dan Rather Medal at UT School of Journalism and Media at the Moody College of Communications. Pleased to have Mr. Dan Rather himself with us this afternoon to talk more about it. Pleasure to have you, Mr. Rather.
It's a click button, not that button.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me okay?
I'm just having a little bit of trouble. Give me a second.
Okay. There we are. Got the light on now.
Now let's start over if you don't mind.
Okay. I absolutely don't mind at all. Let me go right to the top and I'll count us in. All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. KVUE's own Tony Plohetski has been selected as one of 2 journalists to be honored with the inaugural Dan Rather Medal at UT's School of Journalism and Media at the Moody College of Communications. We're pleased to have Mr. Dan Rather with us to talk more about this afternoon. Mr. Rather, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, it's our pleasure. I love that the awards are the Dan Rather Medals for Excellence in News and Guts. Given that criteria, what was it about Tony's reporting that stood out?
Well, first of all, this is a classic case of deep digging investigative reporting, and to get to a story that powerful people did not want the community to know about. It's exactly the kind of journalism of which we need a lot more. There was tough competition in this category, even though this is our first inaugural year with the medal. I think what stood out the most is that the relentless, the determination not to let those who are in powerful positions keep a tough truth covered up. As I say, this was something of a classic case of a journalist, and by the way, the journalistic institutions, both print and television, stood behind him as a long investigation revealed a lot of truths that were important for the community to know that powerful people did not want them to know. It's just the very definition of the kind of courageous investigative reporting that was both news and it took guts to get it.
It really is essential. Of course, we feel that way here as well. The way folks read, watch, listen to journalists has changed a lot over the last several years, but journalism itself, Dan, is as important as ever, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I think people who think about it will recognize this. Look, I understand that a lot of people don't trust journalists or journalism institutions, television, print, or radio, but, you know, a free and independent, fiercely independent when necessary press is the red beating heart of freedom and democracy. I say that it's not just for the benefit of journalists, it's a benefit for the society, for the country as a whole. And this kind of reporting, the kind of reporting that Tony did, underscores that point.
I would agree 100%. The job is not to be honored, obviously, but it sure is nice when it's recognized. Along those lines, you're very active still on social media, over 2 million followers on Twitter. What is it about that platform and staying engaged like that you still enjoy?
Well, you know, I'm a reporter. What you're looking at is, for better or for worse, is a reporter who got lucky, very lucky, and is far above average blessed. That for whatever reason, the only thing I've ever wanted to be is a reporter, and I have a passion for doing it. Social media has opened up a whole new vista for me. I'm still trying to get my head around some of it, but as you know, I'm on Twitter and Facebook, and we have a new platform on Steady. But, you know, I do want to emphasize that these medals, which were put out by the Moody School of Communication, they're not about me. They put my name on it, but I want to emphasize this is about the kind of journalism of which the country needs a lot more, and calling attention to those journalists like Tony Plohetski who are doing the good, hard work. That's what the medals are about.
I'd like to ask you a couple of current questions, if that's okay with you, Mr. Rather.
Sure.
President Biden today blamed former President Trump in many ways for what's happening on the border now. You were clearly critical of President Trump along the way. As a journalist, how hard is it, and are you ready to be critical of President Biden as well?
Well, you know, when we were talking about the need for journalists to stand up and try to find the truth, and but even if powerful people don't want it out, I thought at the news conference, I mean, some people would think journalists spent too much time on it. I'm not one of those who believes that. That, you know, President Biden will have to rise or fall on his own remarks. But we do know this, that the border has been a complicated problem through a lot of presidencies, going back, the Clinton presidency, George W. Bush's presidency, Obama presidency, the Trump presidency, and now the Biden presidency. And if President Biden is of a mind that he thinks he can get past this and sort of keep the emphasis on what he considers and what many people consider more important things like the coronavirus and what we're going to do about the economy, I'm sorry to say I think he's mistaken, because you can argue about whether it should be or not, but immigration is a passionate subject for a lot of people. What's happening on the border is serious. Each person will have to make up their own mind about whether President Biden is doing a worse or better job. I will point out that it's still early in the Biden administration, so we can make a judgment maybe when we go a little deeper into his administration, not so much here in the first few weeks and months.
In light of what we've seen in Atlanta and in Boulder, Colorado, the mass shootings in the last few days, couple of weeks, do you see the president doing enough? Should he be doing more? Or where is he in line with what you think should be done with these mass shootings?
I'm very sorry. My hearing is not what it once was. If you could repeat the question,
absolutely.
I'll try to answer it for you. So sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I know that legislation is currently being discussed about gun legislation, gun laws, in light of what's happened in Atlanta and Boulder. We've seen this before, Mr. Rather, obviously, which is sad in itself. But is the president in a position to do more, do you think, when it comes to gun legislation?
Well, I do think that President Biden is going to try to use the president's power for some administrative moves, but those don't last very long. Look, this crisis about gun violence, if we get it out of the hands of the politicians who seek to use it, both Republicans and in some cases Democrats, to use it to keep us divided so they can stay in power, if we could just get the politicians out of it, most people agree, gun owners and those who don't own guns, that it would be reasonable to have a waiting period, maybe a couple of days. You buy the gun, you come by and pick it up 2 or 3 days, and then a background check. Those are two common sense things, which 75 or 80% of Americans in polls saying they agree. So the public has common sense things in mind that could help with this gun violence. But unfortunately, the politicians, those who are committed to trying to divide the country, just keep on saying, look, nothing can be done, nothing should be done. But I'm old enough to remember the civil rights movement and some other great movements, women's right to vote, and those sort of things in the country. It takes time. We'll solve this gun violence problem. Somewhere up ahead, we'll solve it. In the meantime, as you say, time after time after time, we have to keep going through these things like what happened in Atlanta and Boulder.
Just a couple of more things. And again, thanks so much for your time. Governor Abbott here in Texas says Austin is a mess when it comes to policing currently. Do you agree with that statement? And what's the answer to policing in a city like Austin? What's the fix to get through this period in time here in Austin?
Well, I do not agree with the governor that Austin's a mess when it comes to policing. Do we have problems? Of course we have problems. The answer is for the public to get involved, and let's don't fall into the trap of letting politicians, Republican or Democrat, try to use this issue to keep us divided. That Austinites can come together and make some common sense decisions again on what needs to be done in terms of improving the policing, and at the same time what needs to be done to give the police the backing and support that they need. Most people could reach common ground on those things fairly quickly. But when the politicians get involved back and forth, it makes it very, very difficult. And unfortunately, right now, the issue of policing and whether there should be reforms, and if so, what reforms there should be, has become an emotional political football. And I'm fearful that nothing is really going to get done.
You live in Texas, a proud, I believe, Sam Houston State University grad. Clearly, a lot of people in Texas have guns. You talked about that just a few minutes ago. How do you talk to people when it comes to these mass shootings and you see all the emotion that's clearly involved in both sides of this debate? What are your conversations like with gun owners and friends of yours that own guns? What do you all discuss?
Well, first of all, that I have owned guns, my father, my grandfather, and I think my great-grandfather. In Texas, a lot of people own guns and have guns. The issue is not guns or no guns. The issue is what can we use, and I keep coming back to the phrase, that are common sense things that will help us keep these mass killings from happening as often as we can. Now, there is a public health factor going into this. A lot of people have health problems, and some of them wind up involved in these mass shootings. So it is a complicated issue. But again, there are some things that we can reach: waiting period for the purchase of guns, background checks. With automobiles, you can't drive an automobile until you first of all been trained, at least at a minimum, about safety of the car, and then you have to have a license. The same thing with a boat. I know there are people who listen to this program who say, listen, no, they're coming to take my guns. I just say, with a smile, listen to my brothers and sisters, we can solve this problem if we just concentrate on the common ground. Nobody's coming to take anybody's guns. What we're talking about is some common sense measures. And if you don't like the ones I've suggested, then let's listen to some suggestions. But what we don't need to do is have politicians try to exploit this issue for their own desires of staying in power. Unfortunately, we find far too much of that in the Republican Party and a lot in the Democratic Party as well, because a lot of money is involved. The National Rifle Association and the gun manufacturers and ammunition manufacturers lobby heavily to get their way. Up to and including now, they've had their way of saying no laws, not even common sense things dealing with guns. We've got to move past that, and I'm confident that we'll, at least eventually.
Finally, you got the COVID vaccine. I believe I saw that earlier this year. First of all, you're feeling good? You look great. How do you feel about all adults being eligible now to get the vaccine next week?
Well, we can't get the vaccine into as many arms as possible soon enough. It is true that my wife and I, we stood in line, waited our turn, and now we've had both shots of the vaccine. We're moving toward a point where most of the people in the country who want the vaccine will be vaccinated. The question right now is whether enough people will get vaccinated soon enough in order to stop, among other things, these new kind of coronaviruses that are taking place somewhere in the country. But no question about it, the thing to do is get the shots. I have no patience with people who say, well, I don't trust the shots. I don't know what's in them. Listen, you've been eating hot dogs all your life, and you have no idea what it is. If you can eat hot dogs all your life and not worry about what's in it, I would gently and respectfully suggest that you can not worry about what's in the vaccine. Just get the vaccine. It's important for the country that you do so.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, Mr. Rather, but I've eaten my share of hot dogs over the years. Finally, a last question for you. It was asked today at the press conference with President Biden if he would run again for re-election. Obviously, he's barely 2 months into his first term, so the question might be premature. But do you see yourself supporting a Joe Biden candidacy in 2024?
Well, I think if you have to bet it, that you would bet that Joe Biden runs in 2024. But, look, as a reporter, you learn not to look too far ahead, that he who lives by the crystal ball learns to eat a lot of broken glass. And I have eaten more than my share trying to predict things. Right now in 2024, is Joe Biden even going to be a candidate? Too early to tell. We have to deal with today is today. If you had to bet it, I think you bet that if his health holds, and I would expect that it would, that he probably will run again in 2024. But before that, we have the off-year elections in 2022. I think the Democrats will have a very difficult time in the off-year election. A lot depends on where the economy goes as we get a little better with the coronavirus. And by 2024, who knows what's going to happen.
Who knows?
Thanks a lot. I appreciate you having me on today. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate your time, Mr. Rather. You're welcome on KVUE anytime. Hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
All right. Thank you.